Hello, I'm Bill Monroe, and welcome to 2-Minute Talk Tips. This week's tip, don't party before your talk. A few days ago, we had the Golden Globe Awards. The alcohol is free-flowing at this event, and many of the award recipients do imbibe liberally. It's how some of the thank you speeches can be so funny, so tweetable, so memorable, and we laugh and laugh at the absurdity of it. But for all those folks that we're laughing at as they sometimes make fools of themselves up there receiving their awards, how many of them do we really respect? Consider instead Oprah. Oprah's speech was a bit different. For one, it was planned well in advance. If you want to check it out, visit 2minutetalktips.com/Oprah. Her talk, interestingly enough, was sober, it was stately, and it was on topic. And of course, it dominated the news cycle the next day. At the Golden Globes and at many events that speakers do speak at, there's an opportunity to drink during an event. This is much more common in afternoon and evening events. Some speakers choose to drink just to take the edge off their nerves. Others choose to get the party going early. As a speaker, though, resist, especially if you don't speak a lot. You see, most of the time you're going to need your brain sharpened, not softened, before you give an important talk or an important speech. Many times, it may seem like having a drink or two may take the edge off and make us more effective, but often it's going to have just the opposite effect. So stay sharp, stay clean until you give your talk, and then go ahead and party. Ultimately, you have a choice. You could be the buzzed celebrities up there accepting their awards, or you could choose to be Oprah. And when in doubt, choose to be Oprah. Stick around, and after the break, we're going to talk some more about Oprah's speech. Welcome back. I never expected to dedicate an entire episode to Oprah Winfrey, but here we are. So let's talk today about Oprah and storytelling. What's really interesting about the speech she gave is not just the content and not just that it got such a positive reception, but that reception actually led to the trending Twitter hashtag of President Oprah. Now, I don't know if Oprah would make a good president, but I'm pretty sure she would make an excellent presidential candidate. So let me set some context here, especially if you are not listening to this episode in January of 2018. This year's Golden Globes Awards ceremony is following quickly on the heels of the massive sexual harassment revelations that have been rocking the Hollywood industry, starting with reports of Harvey Weinstein's behavior and leading into behavior by Kevin Spacey, Louis C.K., and on and on. Now, normally this is a pretty laid-back awards show, but this year, nearly all of the attendees were wearing black in recognition of the victims of widespread sexual harassment in the industry. And many of them also wore pins with the hashtag Time's Up, signaling an end to an era of pernicious sexual harassment throughout the industry. And of course, this is all happening against the backgrounds of the Trump administration, the public rise of neo-Nazi groups, and renewed white supremacy. And of course, also after the 2016 elections, which led to a large-scale rethinking on what it actually takes to become president. So this year, Oprah Winfrey accepted the Cecil B. DeMille's Award. This is essentially a Lifetime Achievement Award, and she gave an 8.5-minute, 1,000-word acceptance speech that became the lead news item the next day, and of course spawned the hashtag President Oprah. So let's talk about some of the key elements of that talk. I want to talk about her storytelling, I want to talk a little bit about her goal and her call to action, and of course, we'll touch on her prep. All three of these are important elements that we as speakers need to keep in mind as we prepare our own presentations, whether those are going to be thanking someone for a Lifetime Achievement Award or asking for an adjustment to the marketing budget in the next quarter. Let's start with talking about storytelling. Oprah tells two key stories in this presentation. First one she tells us about Sidney Poitier winning an Oscar in the 60s and how that turned into an inspiration for her. And the second is about Recy Taylor, a victim of a vicious sexual assault in 1944 in Alabama. These two stories help frame the speech that Oprah is giving. One of them talks about how far Black women can go and how representation can be inspiration, whereas another talks about overcoming the challenges and injustice of historical racism. What's also interesting here is, in telling the story of Recy Taylor, she also connects that story of the vicious sexual assault to the story of Rosa Parks, whom most folks know as simply someone who took a stand for equality by taking a seat on the bus and not getting up. What most folks don't realize is that Rosa Parks was also more deeply involved in the civil rights movement. Her simply refusing to give up her seat on that bus was not her first foray into the civil rights movement. And this is an interesting way of tweaking the American cultural narrative around the Rosa Parks story. In addition to the technique of how she uses these stories, what I think is really important is that they are in this speech to begin with. Oprah has managed to include two very significant stories into her 8.5-minute, 1,000-word speech. 1,000 words is not a lot. 8.5 minutes is not a very long time. And this is really important to keep in mind, because one of the main objections I hear to storytelling techniques and to including stories in presentations is that it takes too much time away from the content. And yet Oprah, in one of her most important speeches ever, is still able to include those two speeches, is still able to land her content, and to do it with time to spare. If Oprah can include two significant stories in that simple 8.5-minute speech, most speakers can include one story in a 20-minute speech. So in addition to recognizing the importance of storytelling, what's also interesting is how these stories help highlight her goal and her call to action. Now, there are a couple of ways to look at just what was Oprah's goal with this speech. What was her call to action? Was one of her main goals to test the waters for a possible presidential run? It's possible. I don't know. I think it's likely we won't know Oprah's real presidential ambitions until later in 2018, after the midterm elections happen. My guess at this point, and I guess we're going a little off topic here, but my guess is that if the Democrats pull off a significant win in the 2018 midterm elections, the 2020 presidential candidate for the Democratic Party will likely be a more traditional politician. If, on the other hand, the Republicans pull off a major win in the midterm elections in 2018, then I think an Oprah candidacy in 2020 becomes a lot more likely, or potentially another non-traditional candidate. But I think we've still got about a year to figure out exactly how that's all going to fall out. But let's put the presidential ambitions aside for the moment. Her theme is about speaking truth to power, and about recognizing the stories that are out there across the spectrum of the population. Stories that come from the blue collar and the white collar, from the poor, the lower, the middle, and the working class, and helping to raise those stories up so that the existing power structure has to listen to those stories and can no longer victimize the folks who are disempowered. She also takes some time to defend the press that she says is under siege. Oprah is calling for hope in her speech. She wraps it up saying, "So I want all the girls watching here now to know that a new day is on the horizon. And when the new day finally dawns, it will be because of magnificent women, many of whom are right here in the room tonight, and some pretty phenomenal men, fighting hard to make sure they become the leaders who take us to the time when nobody ever has to say, 'Me too,' again." That's what she's calling for. Her call to action is for people to see a new future, to envision a world where people are not victimized. And she's calling on everybody to join in the fight for that better world. And I think, in some respects, that sort of follows the theme that's run through Oprah's career. It's been about sharing stories that might not otherwise be heard. It's about elevating voices and sharing her platform with others. And I think that becomes a very interesting perspective. I think it's also one of the things that highlights the importance of speaking and the importance of rhetoric. All of those things are ways to amplify a voice, a view, and to give a voice to those who may feel disempowered. Speaking effectively is one of the tools we have to help our voice be heard, regardless of our background and regardless of where we come from and regardless of gender and race. Being able to articulate what we want to say, being able to bring that forward, that's something we're all working to be better at. That's something we're all working to promote. And in many respects, that lines up nicely with what Oprah is calling for in her speech. Now, of course, Oprah's award was announced back in December, so she had a month or so to prepare for it and to write it and to rehearse it, and I think that was evident in her delivery. Of course, in the past, Oprah hosted a daily talk show for many, many years. Oprah can wing it. Oprah can get up on a stage, can get up in front of a crowd of people and start talking and tell her story and land the points she wants to make. Oprah can wing it. But I think it's clear in this case, she did not wing it. And that's an important lesson for speakers to keep in mind, especially as we get better and as we get more comfortable with speaking in front of groups of people and with throwing together a talk at the last minute. There's this strong temptation to just go up there and wing it, to shortcut the idea of prep work and rehearsal. And yet that prep work and rehearsal is just as important later in our careers as it was earlier. It's the most important thing we can do to be more effective, to ultimately meet the goal that we want to meet. In Oprah's presentation, she was serious and welcoming. She took a tone that is meant to empower her audience and to uplift them with gravity. She looked straight at the camera. She didn't get up there to talk to the Hollywood Foreign Press who gave her the award. She got up there to talk to the American viewing public as a whole. And because she planned and prepared and rehearsed, she was able to bring celebration, education, hope, and dignity to her speech. She tied her themes into the stories she used callbacks to reference themes throughout the beginning, the middle, and the end of her presentation, and most importantly, to make an impact. She told us what she stands for, and in doing so, she gave us a speech about Oprah without giving us a speech about Oprah. Ultimately, the key is she did not toss it together. So I think those are probably the three most important things that we as speakers can take away from Oprah's talk. Her powerful use of storytelling, the way she brought her themes and calls to action throughout the speech, and how much hard work and preparation went into making sure that speech would be effective. So that's it for this week. What do you think speakers can learn from Oprah's speech? Go ahead and tell us in the comments for episode 44 at 2minutetalktips.com. Do you have any questions or other topics you'd like us to cover on a future episode of 2minutetalktips.com? Go ahead and call us at 650-TALK-TIP or shoot me an email at bill@2minutetalktips.com. If you haven't already listened to or read Oprah's speech, go ahead and head on over to 2minutetalktips.com/Oprah, and you'll find links to both the video and the transcript. And of course, next time you're at an event with an open bar, don't drink before you give your talk. Give your talk, and then go ahead and hit the bar to your heart's content. And ultimately, don't get best, get better. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week.